I truly believe we live in a unique time in history from a technological perspective. You're seeing so many interrelated or converging fields. How well is Israel positioned to deal with convergence? How well is Israel positioned to borrow these advancements in chemistry and take them to brain research? Borrow these new sensors that were developed for military use and bring them into neuroscience. It is very accepted here to move fast. It's very accepted here to leave things in the past. There is not a lot of political legacy. There's not a lot of legacy per se. And you've seen Israel adapt from hardware to software, from software to internet, from internet to apps, from apps to big data, from big data to AI. You've seen in the span of 20 years how the Israeli ecosystem sort of adds layers as the industry grows. Israel in the last 4 years has become an automotive player, leading player in the world. We never made cars here. We don't have a legacy of making cars here, but as soon as cars were digitized, it met the Israeli strength in AI, processing, etc. So I think we've mastered this cycle, and because of in the era of permanent evolution, you don't know what the next thing is going to be. The fact that you can sort of dress and undress quickly is perhaps a defining quality for prosperity in an era of permanent evolution is adaptiveness. I think what will define its capability to continue to be competitive in this era is its ability to truly play a global role. So be part of the big decisions, be part of where the flow of brains and data and finances goes. Year on year in double digits in terms of trades and investment. A big player in the Israeli venture capital domain today is Chinese private investors and institutionals. To an interesting degree, the Chinese and the Israelis or the Jewish culture have a lot of things in common in terms of the fact that they're at the same time ancient people who are interested in making contribution to the world.
So this is Sibo's R&D kingdom. This is where we have software engineers and hardware engineers, firmware engineers and QA, and this is where the magic happens. Making a smart product is a complicated and painful process. We decided that we are going to build a platform that will make it easy for every company to make their product smart. 15 years ago, it was difficult to develop a website. Today is much easier. If you take someone and will put them in front of Wix, they will get an amazing website within an hour. Today, it's difficult to develop IoT products. Soon, it will be much, much, much easier. You will be able to make a smart ceiling fan or a smart mattress or a smart baby walker or a smart dog collar. We want to measure the heartbeat of the dog, we want to measure the location of the dog, the motion of the dog, and the temperature of the dog. So Sibo so far found for me 36 different solutions. So I can use the left-hand filters just to say, guys, I don't want it to cost more than $12 to order a prototype. Using the system, we are giving you the ability to bring the product to a stage that is ready for production. The quantity that you will produce, it all depends on you. We are at the moment 50 employees. We have 3 centers around the world. The R&D center is here in Tel Aviv. We have the sales and marketing office in San Francisco. And we have the supply chain office in Shenzhen.
In the last few years, many Israeli startups are really starting to shift their focus from the US to China, and they're getting much better at knowing and understanding the Chinese investment culture and also what Chinese consumers are looking for.
The US and China is almost opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of individualistic versus collectivist. And Israel's sort of in the middle, and the kibbutz was obviously the epitome of the collectivist mentality. So it's an interesting kind of hybrid. It's as if China's discovered Israel. And at the same time, you have this kind of political fight with Israel. The disinvestment movement globally, it basically hasn't had much impact because of investment from Chinese funds and Israeli funds. And it seems to be going the direction of innovating here. Here's the Chinese edition. China translated the book first, and later on the European countries with less sense of urgency. So you could kind of see where the biggest hunger for innovation was. The Asian countries admire success. They see something successful and they want to learn from it. I think actually preferable to the Western tendency. It's almost feel negative about success sometimes. This is just kind of at the beginning. We should be building actually startups together. We should be co-founding companies that are designed to solve Chinese problems.
Shenzhen is obviously the center of manufacturing. So SIBO won't be completely an Israeli company. I believe that the R&D will stay here forever, but the sales will obviously be in China and in the US, and the supply chain will be obviously in China. We are here to build a huge company. We are here to build the largest IoT development platform in the world.
There was the frustration for a while that all this amazing startup nation brand wasn't actually creating a lot of value for the average Israeli because many of these startups were being sold at a very early stage. But I think that's changing. And just since 2013, you already have 15 Israeli companies that reached the $1 billion valuation.
Statistic-wise, you see how few unicorns there are. So the risk to try to aspire to be unicorn is very, very high. You increase your risk, like climbing a higher mountain is more difficult than to climb a hill. Probably the reward also is higher, but the risk is much higher. The things which are very good in startups, that everybody has an opinion, everybody is committed, everybody make decision, everybody run on his own way. This is good when you have small groups. When you have big groups, you have to give marching orders. This is not the kind of culture that you can have.
The same things that make us good at startups tend to make us bad at big companies. The innovation process is one of experimenting, of trying and failing, and taking risks and being able to move quickly. The scaling process is one of sales, marketing, management, and the people who are good at one aren't necessarily good at the other.
I think where the world is going, billion-dollar companies are not what they used to be. So should there be scale at the billion? Yes, there should be. That's a good indicator that we have matured. Some of our ecosystem has matured, but is that a single indicator of whether Israel made a transition into scale-up nation, and is scale-up nation by definition a desirable effect? I don't think so. Ultimately, this country doesn't have the privilege of making, radical mistakes. As we grow, is this thing that at any given moment there's a silver bullet here. If you don't do things right, the whole thing can collapse. America can make mistakes. UK can make mistakes. Big countries with legacy, with a lot of people, with natural resources, they can make mistakes. For Israel, for Israelis, mistakes at a greater scale can have very, very bad consequences, and there might not be a way back on quite a number of dimensions here.
There was always a debate in Israel, should young Israeli startup being acquired early, or should they become like the next big company? I sold my company that was maybe 9 years old, but it was still early at that time, to Intel. But today, you see that it's like it was a young forest with very small trees, and most of the trees have been acquired, but now it's getting more and more mature forest. So you have all kinds of trees in all age. And I think that's what's happening now to Israel. It's the beginning of getting mature. And more people are doing that, it attracts other people to do it. You don't need me to talk or something, right? Just walking. I can sing. If you think historically about deceptions, deceiving was a technique used in warfare for thousands of years ago. It was never really used effectively in cybersecurity. Well, they have cakes, as you can see. Let's follow the cake. So what Elusive is doing is turning every machine in your network to a deceiving entity. Deceptions is a combination of science and art. If you give some of our researchers a book and you tell them what is written in the book, they can tell you, but they can quickly tell you what is not written in the book. That's the way they think. In this office, where's the cake? Hi. ודאיכם אורחים, בדיוק, זה עיתון weird. Wired, I'm sorry. They said they have a cake in here somewhere. Yeah. Oh, it's already been gone. The reason the idea was created, it's because, everybody was focusing on malware, and let's do a better mousetrap for the next malware. And the idea was, let's take one step backward and think like the attacker. Basically, once they penetrate to a machine, let's say they penetrate to John Smith machine, and they really need to answer two questions. Where can I go from the current machine? How can I get the privilege to do the move? They'll grab the admin credentials and they start to move laterally from one machine to another. And that's why all the existing product cannot detect him. So the challenge to detect him or prevent him is enormous. You really can't. It's almost a lost fight. And that's why bringing the dimension of deceiving into the cyber. Think about like the Matrix movie. We create those, streets and houses which doesn't exist, but he believes that he's walking in the Matrix. That's what we are doing. By deceiving him and being interactive with him, they can see how far he is from the assets, and they can see exactly after which or what kind of assets he's running after. At any moment, they can decide, okay, I want to pull the trigger now, we have enough information, let's stop it now, and they just press the kill button. From my experience, in startups for like 30 years almost now, when I was working outside of Israel, they will have very hard time to come into uncertainty. There'll be more planning, there'll be more, think a lot before they emerge on something, less risk takers. Uncertainty is something that as you're born in Israel, you breathe it, you drink it, you eat it. I mean, we are in a country that doesn't yet have, borders that are acknowledged and agreed by everybody. Okay, so even our borders are not certain. Nothing is certain in Israel.
Being in Israel is kind of a genetic disorder. You always want to come back. This is the only country in the world when there is war. Usually when there is war, you see people running away from the country. You see caravans of refugees going with all their things. In Israel, when there is war, you go to JFK and you see in front of the counter of El Al, people are sleeping on the floor waiting for their flight to fly back home.
I'm here every day to remind people that they have the power to change their reality. They're telling us that Israel is an empire of technology because we are in constant state of war. War means profit, because when you're in a state of war, you can always develop new weapons because you have where to test it. I think you can understand from this that my views about the occupation are that I'm not exactly for it.
It's true that in the last few years we see an increasing number of Israelis opening companies overseas. I think being sick of the political situation is the major reason. People usually don't say it, because it doesn't sound good.
I refuse to accept that this is our reality and forever will be that way. You talk to people, everyone's certain the whole place is going to die or to collapse tomorrow. A lot of Israelis who live abroad are relieved for a few years. They just, the main feeling they have is, I don't have to worry about making this place work. This place works, it's Silicon Valley, it will work with me or without me. And for a few years, that's great. A few years later, they're like, shit, I'm such a small cog, right? I don't make a difference, I need to go back. In Israel, I make a difference. Israel is a country in a constant beta. We know that it's like an ongoing experiment. So to an extent, we have this privilege that things don't work very well here, because then it's always easy to challenge the status quo. It's not like it's a well-functioning country that you sit around and say, hey, you know what? We're done.
I think that the big thing we need to do that actually isn't being addressed enough now is to open our doors. I want to walk into Israeli startups and not just see Israelis.
In tech, in startups, Haredim and Arabs collaborate all the time because we're facing a lot of the same challenges. So I hope we manage to both integrate and do amazing things in high tech and then still maintain our personality and our values.
Entrepreneurs are very pragmatic creatures. between Israelis and Palestinians, I don't think it's any different. But I do believe that the political reality ultimately will limit those kinds of interactions and can go only so far.
You know, you'd like to see much more mutual understanding growing between the two sides. You need real tangible political movements toward a solution. But then you also need Palestinians and Israelis to not only meet each other at checkpoints.
I think if we take the political sensitivity aside, they are not even cousins. As the history said, they are two brothers. You can see how they are connected. They have same common behaviors on happiness, on sadness, on winning, on losing, on everything. Even the language, the common words between the languages, they are that connected.
You know, I think a lot of people doubt what we're doing, but diamonds are built under pressure. So one of these companies is going to make it big and we'll have an exit, and that will change our ecosystem for the better.
When you look around in our neighborhood and you look at a place like Syria or Egypt or even Jordan or Lebanon, you look at the hatreds that exist between groups. So we have to hope that this is not going to end that way, that this is going to somehow end differently.
President Peres used to say that wisdom doesn't have a passport. It's a global trait. And we're transitioning from a world of borders that was based on tens of thousands of years of agriculture. But in this day and age of science, of being able to digitally transfer insights and intelligence and value, it transcends the borders and it transcends a lot of the political realities. But we are in an interim period. There is no global government yet. Hopefully, the positive attitude of the tech industry will prevail. But there are disgruntled people who are getting the short end of that stick. They also enjoy the same trends. If I want to create a dirty bomb 5 years from now, that would cost me $200. 10 years ago would cost me $200 million. So the same mathematics apply. The era of Persian Revolution applies on both ends. And if we don't know how to manage that, and if we don't create the mechanisms to guide humanity, as we have done before, to guide humanity into leveraging the positive elements of that, we're headed for a bumpy ride.